As the other member of NAFTA, Canada exports 75% of its goods to the United States. And Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said that he is willing to renegotiate the deal. He told reporters on Thursday that, quote, "If the Americans want to talk about NAFTA, I'm more than happy to talk about it." He added that it was important to periodically reassess trade deals so that they continue to benefit the Canadians. And for more insight into the future of NAFTA, we're joined by Diane Francis. She is the Senior Fellow of the Eurasia Center at the Atlantic Council. Diana, always good to see you.
Thank you.
So U.S. President-elect Donald Trump said that NAFTA is the worst trade deal the U.S. has ever signed. We're used to big statements from Mr. Trump. Justin Trudeau, Canada's Prime Minister, saying today that he's willing to renegotiate a preemptive move. What's your reaction?
Well, we have to be willing to renegotiate because any of the three parties can get out of it with a 6-month notice. So he wants to change it, and I think that would be welcome in Canada, and I'll tell you why. It started off as a two-way deal called the Free Trade Agreement between Canada and the U.S. That was fine. Our labor rates are the same, our laws are the same. Then Mexico was brought in 8 years later, and there are much cheaper labor rates, and there's a lot of problems attached to it, and they've really gotten a huge number of jobs from both the U.S. and Canada. So, really, I think that it's in order maybe to do two separate deals, one bilateral and one trilateral.
Do you see that happening? Do you see the U.S. and Canada joining forces and leaving Mexico out in the cold?
Not leaving it out in the cold, because remember, the U.S. multinationals, the auto industry, the manufacturers, and the Canadians have been living with an architecture that has allowed them to benefit from the lower labor costs in Mexico, while at the same time tapping into the Mexican market, which has gotten much bigger. So there's actually benefits to being part of it. But I'm just saying, maybe you have two bilateral deals.
Well, anything is possible at this stage. How feasible is it to just come and scrap it all? It's a question of 6 months, you say?
Oh, you can't scrap it all overnight. You just can't do that. And some of it is so intricately enmeshed. It's sort of like putting Humpty Dumpty back together again, or unscrambling the egg. This is very difficult because people have made 30, 40-year decisions to build assembly plants. I'm talking about the American automakers, the parts guys down in Mexico, to take advantage of lower labor costs, but also to take advantage of a market. Mexico has tripled in size since 1994. The U.S. and Canada haven't tripled in size. So there's a lot of people buying cars and American goods and Canadian goods in Mexico.
Well, Mexico saying that they are willing to modernize NAFTA. The foreign minister spoke on CNN. He said that there is an opportunity to make it more beneficial. And President Peña Nieto said that he and Trump have agreed to meet sometime before his inauguration. What do you expect there?
Well, I think that basically there's going to be some more protectionist measures introduced by Trump to benefit the American economy at the expense of the Mexican economy. I don't think Canada's an issue, because I'll tell you why. Canadian economy is virtually controlled by American multinationals. 80% of what we export to the U.S. is American multinationals with branch plants in Canada transferring it back to the U.S. So we're not really a problem. And I think they'll be kind of asymmetrical. So you may still have a NAFTA kind of arrangement, but Canada and the U.S. will do some things more blending-wise, and there is less need for protectionism against Canada. In fact, there's no need for protectionism in Canada, against Canada.
Well, you mentioned the auto sector, and Trump getting a big nod of approval from the head of the auto workers, saying he wants to plot a plan to overrun or renegotiate NAFTA. So what could that mean for the U.S. auto industry and for Mexico?
It means that they will close plants in Mexico that were open because of the NAFTA benefits, and they will repatriate a lot of those jobs and those auto parts plants back to the United States. That's what Trump wants. That's a win. That'll also benefit Canada. You see, we're both high labor cost countries compared to Mexico, so it's all good. But must remember that Mexico's tiny. The whole NAFTA area is $21.5 trillion in size. Canada's $1.5 trillion. Mexico's $1 trillion. The United States is 86% of the NAFTA economy.
Let's focus on some of the sectors here. Which sectors or industries in Canada would be poised to benefit from a revamped agreement?
Well, I don't think many of them, but maybe any of the manufacturing and auto parts that are going down to Mexico because it makes more sense. Some of those jobs may be repatriated. My guess is that most of them will be repatriated to the U.S. because they're 86% of the deal. They won't necessarily come back to Canada. The Canadian auto parts guys are already very heavily involved in the U.S. Still. So I think that auto is going to be very disrupted. Auto and manufacturing of all kinds is going to be the areas, the sectors that are U.S. owned and Canadian owned and Mexican owned that are going to be the most disrupted and have to relocate jobs.
All right, a lot at stake for all three. Thank you so much, Diane Francis, Senior Fellow of the Eurasia Center at the Atlantic Council.